Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today you can hear me commentating a Pokémon trading card game. More importantly, this is a game in the very first weekend where Ancient Origins is legal. And we have just rotated as well, so we are playing from XY until Ancient Origins. So if you're trying to get acquainted in a new standard format, I would say watching some of these videos is a very, very good place to start indeed. I should also note that due to time restrictions on the day these games were played as a best of one, and I should give a huge thank you to the lovely people at Athena Games, who not only allowed me to record on the day, but actually went out of their way to help me to do so. And round 5 will determine who wins this particular league challenge. We have world's competitor Nick Pearce and his Manectric deck that we saw back in round 2. And he's going to be taking on Will Belton and his Tyranitar Bats deck that we saw back in round 3. Big question is, who is going to win this match and go home with the title? Bearing in mind that both of these chaps are coming into this game at 4 wins and 0 losses and are in fact undefeated. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so this is the final. This is what it has all come down to. Are you excited? You should be. On the left, we've got Nick Pearce with his Manectric deck. We saw him way back in round 2 beating down on a Beautifly. And on the right, we have Will Belton. He is playing Tyranitar. You saw him beat down on me in round 3, which was terribly sad, but hey ho, these things happen. Quick note before we get going, Nick's mat there, as you can see, is a beautiful mat. It was drawn by a lovely UK lady, Miss Helen Fiddlesticks. I believe she can be found on Facebook at facebook.com/Miss Fiddlestick deck boxes, and she does custom deck boxes, mats, etc. You can, I'm just going to put a link in the description of this video, so rather than try and kind of spell it out for you, just look in the link to this video. And no, this isn't some kind of sponsorship thing or anything like that. She's just a lovely person that happens to do awesome mats and deck boxes. So, you know, if you think the mat on the left looks cool, if you like Nick's deck, forget my words here, then yeah, hit her up. There'll be a link in the description. I think they're pretty fantastic. So, this is going to be an interesting kind of matchup, but it definitely heavily favours Nick. Now, I am assuming that you have watched the previous rounds in advance of this video. If you haven't done that, then I heartily recommend you go back and watch them before we go in, because I'm going to be commentating assuming that you've seen them. So, Nick's got both the early pressure with the Manectric, not forgetting that Manectric does hit the Zubat, etc. for weakness, so he could get some early KOs on Zubats, but more importantly, Nick plays double Regice. Now, when Regice is out, that leaves Will's only attacker as a, you know, all he's left with there are his bats, and it takes quite a long time to kill Regice with those bats. What Will really needs to be doing is focusing on taking down the Regice as soon as they hit the field. That's where his bats really need to be hitting. The problem being, of course, that Tyranitar does 110 damage plus 60 damage for each damage counter attached to them. And Nick wins a flip there and goes first. And the big problem is that he needs to hit the Manectric with, and this is a fairly brutal Juniper. They're getting rid of 2 Lysandra and a VS Seeker. That means most people play 2 Lysandra and 4 VS Seeker. Nick now is down to 3 total Lysandra for the game rather than the 6 he might have. So the bats are really going to be the thing here. So Nick, he's got his Rough Seas in play. He plays an Acrobike, drops a Muscle Band. I didn't quite catch what he got there. Looks like it might have been an Escape Rope. And he gets an Energy on the Regice and just passes. Nick knows that apparently it's not a very good hand. He just showed the judge there. So we see a level ball from Will here. Presumably he's going to be going for a second Zubat. Will's deck essentially has Tyranitar, Shaman, and Bats in. So, sorry Nick, we didn't see that. You showed like the Escape Rope. You really didn't show very well. The thing is, Will's deck is not made for early pressure. Absolute best case scenario for Will here is were he to get a Shaman with a DCE and a Muscle Band, he could do 50 to the Regice, which wouldn't even half kill it. Regice, if I remember correctly, has got 110 HP. So it's going to take quite a while to actually, it's going to take 3 hits even with a muscle band. We see a switch there, which presumably means he's going to dump his hand. Or he's going to play a Shaman to draw more cards. There we go. So playing the switch created a space. We got to draw 3 cards rather than 2. And he plays regular Evil Tal as well. Of course he does. I forgot that. So regular Evil Tal can again put a shift in against Red Jice. But Red Jice has 120 HP. So we're looking... Oh, and of course, we've got Rough Seas. And if I remember correctly, Will doesn't play any counter stadiums. Nick there, he plays a VS Seeker. Now, I was going to say, all he's got in his discard is Lysandra and Sycamore. And he's having to get rid of a couple of Spirit Links, couple of Energy, and an AZ, it looks like. So not the most amazing start from Nick in terms of draw here, but he's doing all right. He's not, however, getting the turn 1 KO, turn 2 attack, because Red Jice takes 3 energy, and Nick is already attached for this turn. Now, that Trainer's Mail presumably is going to net him that Ultra Ball, which could get him, you would like to think, something like a Manectric, and... Annoyingly here, because Nick has already put down an energy, if he were to have a switch or an escape rope, although it doesn't look like he does, he'd actually be in a position here to get the Red Jice, because the Red Jice has a retreat cost of 3, there's no retreating here, but get the Red Jice out the active, and that 20 damage that Manectric's first attack does would actually double with the weakness and KO the Zubat while doing 20 to the bench Zubat. And everything but Tyranitar in Will's deck has lightning weakness. That's the Evil Tal, that's the Bats, and that is the Shaman. So, now Nick, we've already seen, he's used 2 Lysandra and 2 VS Seeker, so assuming he plays a standard list, there's a maximum here, an absolute maximum of 2 Lysandras coming this game. Of course, were he to use one of those Lysandras, then... he could kill a Shaman just for 2 energy with the Manectric. Now, you saw the KO. Red Jice does have a first attack. It doesn't block attacks from EXs. It does 30 damage for 2 energy. Flip a coin if heads they're paralyzed. But, of course, Nick had a muscle band. Zubat's got 40, definitely 40 HP. So he gets KO'd. When I said Nick was missing the turn 2 attack, obviously he got the turn 2 attack. What I meant was the turn 2 resistance blizzard, which is what you're aiming for as a Red Jice player. There was the possibility here that Nick could be hit for 50 damage by a Shaman, and of course Nick really doesn't want that. So Nick would much have preferred to use Resistance Blizzard, but I don't believe he plays double colourless energy here. And of course, if he'd attacked with the Manectric, he would also have done 20 to one of the bench Pokemon. So that would have been a better play, but of course, Nick had to Sycamore, so he had to attach an energy before he did so. It would have been foolish not to. So we see there he plays an Ultra Ball, he gets the Mega Manectric, he's already got a Spirit Link down, so that doesn't end his turn. I believe he's attached, and I can't quite see the energy. I think it looks like Nick's got 3 energy on there. So he's going to be able to do Resistance Blizzard for 90, and it just gives him an element of protection. Now, as it stands, that Evil Tal is doing 30 damage to the Red Jice, and Nick's healing 30 a turn with Rough Seas. Now, if I remember correctly, Will is not playing any counter stadiums here, because Tyranitar, and I covered this in my Tyranitar video, again I'll pop a link to that in the description if I remember. In the Tyranitar video I pointed out there are no stadia that you absolutely need. So Will has essentially saved space in his deck by not playing any. That means that Rough Seas is going to stay there all game. Everything in Nick's deck other than the Shaman, and here we do see always using the first attack, which is very, very clever here. He unfortunately hit a Tails, because he's getting a 2-hit KO. He's hitting 50 and then 90, or 90 and then 90. Evil Tal's got 130. Nick is getting a 2-hit KO anyway, so it makes an awful lot more sense for him to use the first attack and try for the paralysis. Now you see there that Will tried to use Golbat Sneaky Bite. Unfortunately, on his previous turn, Nick had played a Hex Maniac. And he uses VS Seeker there, and that might... I think he's only got 1 VS Seeker left now. Oh, he did... No, sorry, Nick did only have 2 energy on the previous turn. So that just turns off bats, which means there are no bats coming down next turn. So Nick is kind of preparing himself there. So here he is using a second attack, does 90 damage, puts him on 140 total, and gets the KO. So going back to that rough seas, because I keep interrupting myself, it's going to allow Nick to heal 30 damage every turn from any of his Pokemon other than Shaman. And that's going to be absolutely huge. But what I'm liking from Nick here are the subtle plays. So a moment ago, when he used Ice Beam rather than Resistance Blizzard, and this attack is not going to do any damage to Regice, isn't it? I'm sure he used Resistance Blizzard last turn for the KO. He must have done. And that reads, during your opponent's next turn, prevent all effective attacks, including damage, done to it by Pokemon EX. Now, it doesn't matter, because he's going to use Rough Seas to heal it, but he just hit for 30 damage with a Shaman EX against a Regice, which used Resistance Blizzard the previous turn. Wake up, boys. But there's subtle little plays, like I said, and here we get another KO with Resistance Blizzard. And Nick, you can see the power of this Manectric deck here. But it was using that Ice Beam so that he was getting the 2-hit KO anyway, but using Ice Beam gave him the possibility of paralysis and then the KO, stopping Will from actually doing anything useful. And again, if I missed that, do let me know in the comments, but Nick must have used Resistance Blizzard in order to get the KO, otherwise he only would have done 100 damage total over the 2 turns. Resistance Blizzard stops KOs coming from non-EX Pokemon. From EX Pokemon. So I don't see anything that could have happened there other than the boys made a mistake. And they used Rough Seas to heal it off, but that's not the point. Now, I must also point out at this stage, it's about 11 PM in the evening, and we've all had a hard day's work, travelled down to Norwich, and this is round 5 of a Pokemon tournament. So I know I did get a little bit of a couple people pointing out from previous rounds, oh, this was a mistake, and the dude played Silver Bangle. It is late at night at this stage, and we've all had a day's work and then turned up for a Pokemon tournament, so do try and cut us a little bit of slack. So, Will here, he's down 3 prizes, he has very little. He finally gets a Tyranitar down, and he's got an Yveltal in the active. He can do 30 damage here. Now, he would like a Muscle Band, but I would be surprised if Will's deck even plays Muscle Band, because Tyranitar goes for 1-hit KOs. You know, there's not much difference between 110 and 130, really, with Tyranitar, not for most matchups. What he is doing here, and this is a very good play, he's using Oblivion Wing to do 30 damage, but rather than put the energy on the Tyranitar, he's putting it on the non-EX Yveltal. And what he's trying to do here is build up a non-EX Yveltal, and in this way he hopes to be able to get the 1-hit KO on Regice. Problem is, the second attack only actually does 100 damage, so Will need to find an extra 20 damage. And if he doesn't play Muscle Band, we haven't seen one yet. He may or may not, but if he doesn't play Muscle Band, he's going to have to drop a Golbat to do 20 damage and then attack with Yveltal. And let's not forget that Nick plays a second Regice, and I'm fairly certain Nick plays a Sacred Ash as well, so he really can go overboard with a Regice. Now, there is something that Nick has done here which could potentially lead him in trouble, and that is he has benched 3 EXs. So there is a possibility here that Will could get a Mega Tyranitar EX set up, ignore the Regice, and just use 3 Lysanders to pull up the 2 Manectric and the Shaman to get the KO. Now, it's going to be awkward because Tyranitar, to get the KO, Will is going to need to drop a Golbat and then use Destroyer King, Mega Tyranitar's attack, on the very same turn. Now, it looks like this is the very last VS Seeker. And remember, AZ, you discard all the cards attached to it. And he's picking it up. But remember, all he's getting rid of here is a Muscle Band, not the end of the world, and free energy. But the energy can be reattached using Mega Manectric's attack. Now, there's 2 Shaman down. And if I'm Will at this stage, you've got to just kill the EXs. You've now got to go to a full-on focus of, I've got to take down those Mega EXs, and I've got to do it with Tyranitar. Because, you see, it doesn't look like he's playing Muscle Band. He does 30 damage, Nick heals 30 damage with Rough Seas. That's not the way you're going to win the game. He needs to sacrifice a couple of 1-prize Pokemon and hope he can get his Tyranitar going. The good news is, without a Muscle Band, Mega Manectric doesn't even 2-hit KO a Tyranitar. Mega Manectric does 110 damage over the course of 2 turns. it means your opponent is doing 220 damage, and Mega Tyranitar has 240. And that is very, very good here. So, we see a Birch coming from Will, and what Will needs here is a Spirit Link and a Tyranitar. And preferably an energy. He's attached an energy, and what can happen, and he needs a Zubat as well. He needs a lot. But what could, and remember, Nick is out of Lysandra at this stage. He's used 2 Lysander, and he's used 4 VS Seeker. I'm fairly sure he's got none left. So Nick is not going to be able to just Lysandra for his final prize. That ain't happening unless I've miscounted or he plays more than the average Lysander. And I don't believe he does. I'd be surprised if he did. So what Will needs to do here, he needs a Spirit Link Tyranitar to evolve. There's a Spirit Link. He needs a Zubat on the bench as well. There's a Tyranitar. He needs, and a Hard Charm as well. He needs a Zubat here. Oh, now there's an interesting one. He uses a Mega Turbo to get the energy. Now, a Zubat isn't critical. What he needs at this stage, he needs 2 Lysanders and a Zubat. And it doesn't really matter in which order he gets them. Because he needs to KO 2 Shaymin, 2 Lysanders, and he needs to KO a Manectric, which is where the final Lysander comes in, and he'll need a Golbat for that, because he'll need to be doing, more than 210 damage. That is Will's route to victory here. 3 Lysanders and a Golbat. He kills the 2 Shaymin on the turns he doesn't have the Golbat, and he kills the Manectric on the turn he does. That is essentially the only way Will can win here. Nick, for his part, just needs to keep doing what he's doing. He's in a massive prize lead. He's got 2 Mega Manectric. He's got energy on the Regice. But essentially, this game isn't really Nick against Will anymore. Nick essentially can't really can't kind of hurt the game here. Depending on what happens over the next couple of turns. But at this moment, Nick doesn't really control the outcome of this game, as weird as it sounds when he's 4 prizes up. He cannot just play a Lysandra and pull something up from the bench. Now, there is a possibility of an escape rope, but I'm sure I've seen him play 2 already. And if he's gotten rid of 2 already, that means there aren't any more left. I don't think Nick has any option but just attack the active. So what Will needs to focus on here is making sure that the active doesn't die. Now, if he's able to, and we've seen he plays Mega Turbo, if he's able to get a second Tyranitar going and get some retreating into Tyranitar action going on, then he could actually pull this game. This game is not unwinnable. He needs a Lysander here to take down a Shaymin. And he can take a hit. Oh, but he's not able to do so. And now it's starting to go back in Nick's favour. But remember, Nick is not 2 hitting. Now, what Nick needs to do here, the brilliant thing is, he's got Rough Seas in play. So he can just retreat the Manectric, he can heal it with the Rough Seas, and start attacking with Regice. Because why would you not? He's not going to KO that Tyranitar. It's going to be I think he's got a Muscle Band on. So that'll turn it into a 3-hit KO. But the key is, that means that there's going to be no cheeky KOs on Will's part without a Lysandra. It means he can only get the KO with Lysandra. And that's what Will desperately needs here. But remember, if Nick hits the Tyranitar for 90 with the Regice, that Tyranitar's still got 150 damage. And even with a Muscle Band on the Manectric, Nick has nothing that can do 120 damage in 1 turn. So he plays an Ultra Ball, he gets rid of a Hooper, who's brilliant for setting up, but Nick set up, that time has passed. And he's going to get rid of a Manectric. What he could be going for here is a second Regice to try and essentially cycle the Regice to make sure that if one starts taking a hit, he can get around it. But honestly, I don't think Nick needs to be worried about the Regice getting KO'd at this turn. The only kind of extra energy attachments that Will's getting here, he's getting by virtue of Mega Turbo, which can only be put onto non-EX Pokemon. Mega EX Pokemon. And they're not going to be able to hit Regice. But we see Nick here, he's doing the sensible thing. He's retreating the Manectric, and he just gets to heal the Manectric 30 per turn while attacking with the Regice. Now, in an ideal situation, Nick would draw into a Lysander and the game would be over. He would pull up the Shaman off the bench, get the KO, life is good. That is unfortunately not going to happen. But, and this things are going all right for Will here. But I say going all right. He's got free energy on the bench to Tyranitar, but he hasn't played a Lysander. He has, in fact, played a Professor Birch's Observation. Shuffle in your hand into your deck, flip a coin. If heads, you draw 7. If tails, you draw 4. This makes this turn essentially useless for him now, because he's not really doing anything. He's drawing some cards, attaching some cards, but he is in essence not attacking here, unless he plays and can draw into an escape rope. But now there we get the goal back going, the Zubat going down. But again, he's going to need a Lysandra. Now it looks like he's got at least one VS Seeker in hand. So next turn, but see, here's the issue. That Tyranitar is on 90 damage. He will go up to 180 damage this turn when Nick attacks with a Regice, which means he's finally got the VS Seeker to play the Lysander to pull up a Shaman from the bench and get the KO. But if he does so, Nick can just KO with the Regice as soon as it goes to his turn. Will is in a position now where not only does he need to take continual prizes, but he also needs to stop Nick taking a single prize. Now, his job is made much easier by Nick's complete lack of Lysandra left in the deck. If my counting is correct, Nick's out. So the big issue then becomes, can Will keep attacking while stopping Nick attacking? And I'm not entirely sure he can. He can retreat the Tyranitar now, but to what end? He's not got an inexhaustible range of energy. Now, he's got this. Now, okay, there is a potential here. He can. Now, I wouldn't get rid of the Mega Turbo. He basically needs to retreat the Tyranitar, use a VS Seeker for a Lysandra, pull up a Shaman, and kill it with regular Tyranitar EX. Because regular Tyranitar EX for 4 energy does 130 damage. Again, not ideal, but doable. I don't really know what he's going to get with the Golbat here. He needs to save the Golbat for when he's taking a KO. Now, what he needs to do here is use the VS Seeker to grab a Lysandra to pull up the bench Manectric. And although I don't know if that's going to get the KO. No, I don't think it is, because I think the Manectric's on 50. This will put him on to 70, which means... See, I don't quite know what Will's doing here with that Golbat. This seems like an awfully wasted Golbat. All he really needed to do here was manually retreat, use the Mega Turbo. Oh no, I'm sorry, Will. I completely disagree with this play. The way to win this game is to essentially ignore Nick and use VS Seeker to take bench prizes. What he could have done there was manually retreat the Tyranitar, use Mega Turbo to put an energy back. He then could have used the Lysandra to pull up the Shaman and get a KO with the Tyranitar on the bench, and that Tyranitar's got 100 HP. It's not going down next turn. And see, now he's manually retreating it, but it's not going to do any good, really, because that Regice is immune from attacks by EX Pokemon. And he's just played as supporter. I think there was a much, much stronger turn for Will there. I don't begrudge him playing the Ultra Ball to grab the Golbat, especially in a format without N, where you can be fairly sure you're going to be able to keep it in your hand. But what he should have done there was manually retreat the Mega Tyranitar, use the Mega Turbo to put the energy back, use the VS Seeker to grab a Lysandra, keep the Golbat, kill one of his bench Shaman, and then next turn he can try and get going again properly. Because that's his only option here. He's been given a massive piece of good luck by the fact that Nick has used all his Lysandra. Otherwise, this game would be over. If Nick hadn't... And Nick got pretty unlucky. You saw he had some brutal discards. That's the only thing that has stopped this game from already having ended. I think I mean, there was a couple things that happened there. Firstly, Will, he threw away the chance to get 2 prizes. He threw away the VS Seeker, he threw away the Mega Turbo, and then he retreated the Mega Tyranitar anyway, but having lost the ability. And as a side note, if he was going to retreat the Mega Tyranitar, he should have done it before he played the Sycamore, because if you do it before you play the Sycamore, then he can use the Mega Turbo in his hand. Instead, he discarded the Mega Turbo and then retreated, and it didn't really make any difference in which order he did that. So now he's played the AZ and he gets the Tyranitar going. The problem is, if you look at what's going on with Will here, he is successfully prolonging the game. He is making Nick play turn after turn. Sooner or later, Nick is almost certainly going to get a KO. I suppose there's an outside chance of decking out, but I would be very surprised if that happened here. And let's not forget that Will's gone through a fair bit of his deck as well. Again, maybe Will didn't have 3 Lysandres in his deck to use. But there's he needed to go about trying to get the KO in any way that he could. He needed to start drawing prizes and go, and getting himself closer to winning. And the way to do that was with VS Seeker. Given his previous turn, throwing away the VS Seeker, throwing away the Mega Turbo, I don't really see any route for victory here. And Nick's got to be completely unconcerned at this point. Now he's got to be slightly worried about decking out. And one of the downsides of Manectric is the fact that you are dealing, fairly low damage. You're kind of maxing out at 110, really, with Mega Manectric. I know you can do 120 with regular Manectric, but that's not the attack you want to be using mostly. Now here is a good play, but it's too late. That's an excellent play, the escape rope. But now imagine that he'd played the escape rope and he'd already taken 2 prizes and he had the Golbat in hand. He would now be able to put the Zubat active, play the Golbat to put the 2 damage down, and then attack with Tyranitar. Although maybe he only drew into the escape rope because he played the Sycamore, I'm not entirely sure. But that's a turn. And when you're playing Pokemon, you've got to be thinking consistently about where the next prizes are coming from. You've got to be thinking about your route to winning the game. Not just prolonging the game, but winning it. Knowing that, he had 1 VS, he had 1 escape rope. At this stage, he could have taken 4 prizes by now. This isn't really going to do very much. Because, it isn't really going to do all that much, because all he's really doing here, he's hitting the Manectric for 110. Okay, fair enough. And he's picking up the Manectric, the AZ there. But, he's not really doing anything. He wasn't getting any closer to killing. Now, if I see correctly, Nick has just prolonged the game by a turn. I didn't see exactly how much damage he had on there. It was something like 160, something like that. Yes, I believe it had 160 damage on. Nick could have won the game there by just putting his Mega Manectric forward and getting the KO. I was watching the game at this stage. I'm right behind Nick's dice bag. So shame on you, Nick. You had the win, and it doesn't really matter. You're watching the game. We know that Nick is going to win, but Nick has a Mega Manectric on the bench with 2 energy. Tyranitar had, I believe, 90 HP left. Now, let's not forget that the Tyranitar's got a hard charm attached. Well, that doesn't matter. I think he had 80 or 90 HP left. Nick would do 110. Hard charm brings it down to 90. Nick gets the KO. Essentially, like I said, it's the end of a long tournament. It's been a very long day. Nick's got the game sewn up, and we've all been there. When you know you're going to win, you sometimes play a little more clumsily. It's not going to affect the outcome of the game. Nick's still going to win, but on the previous turn, Nick just could have promoted the Mega Manectric and gotten the attack for the win. So here, he's going to have to manually retreat the Tyranitar. It's the only thing he can do to stop the KO. And he's going to put the Tyranitar active, and he's not going to do any damage to the Regice. There was a very slim chance of Will winning the game here. He needed to use his Lysandre to kill a Shaman. He then needed to use the escape rope in conjunction with the Golbat to get the KO on the Mega Manectric. And then he needed another Lysandre to get a KO on a third Shaman. It was an awful lot to ask for. But that was the only way he could have won. What Will has done successfully is given us a longer game. But unfortunately, even though the game's gone on quite some time, there never seems to have been any real risk of Nick losing this game. He's been, and there is the Lysandre to bring up the Shaman to get the KO. This could have been the turn that Will won the game. Oh, no, it couldn't because he's not got enough energy on the active Tyranitar. He's only hitting for 60. But this could have been the turn that Nick won, that Will won the game, potentially. With better management of energy, with focusing on Lysandre as an escape rope, he could have used the earlier VS Seeker for the first two, the escape rope with a Golbat for the second two, because Nick was never going to promote a Shaman. There is an escape rope, however, and the only thing, Will can put up that Tyranitar. Okay, Nick's going to hit it for 90. Next turn, it's over, unfortunately. There's nothing that Will's going to be able to do. Nick is going to, I believe, win the game next turn. Maybe Will's got some kind of switch, but it ain't going to do much. So hopefully this has been an enjoyable game for you lovely people. Hopefully you've learned a bit of something. I've pointed out some plays that could have gone better. I've pointed out some good plays. It has been a fairly one-sided game since the beginning, but I'm hoping that rather than just saying, oh, you sat there and Nick rolled him, I'm hoping that what you could have seen here was an example of some good plays, some bad plays, and, looking at a couple of interesting decks. As a side note, that Evil Taliex could have been really useful earlier for one-hit KOing a Manectric. But of course, it's weak to lightning, so he only could have played it after Nick was completely out of Lysandre's. Hey-ho. Unfortunately, nothing that could be done here. And, Nick is just going to announce... Oh, no, he's Mega Revolve, so it's going to take one more turn. And there we go. We have a win, ladies and gentlemen. Nick has won the game. Congratulations to Nick, who goes 5-0 and wins the Norwich League Challenge. Congratulations to Will, who I believe finishes 4-1 and still makes the top 4. So congratulations to both chaps, and a huge thank you to both of those chaps for letting me record their game. And, of course, a huge thank you to Athena Games, who made me incredibly welcome and helped me to record these games. I very much appreciate that. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. Make sure if you have subscribed already, you get a friend to subscribe, and stick any comments you've got down in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio. And before I go, just very quickly, stay tuned. We've got an expanded league challenge coming next week. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be wonderful.